Very few human beings ever set foot on Arqiok Island. The nearest community is nearly 2 hours away by plane. Most years, the sea ice never melts. It's midnight, the night of summer solstice. Summer is barely beginning. 4 people will visit the island this summer. 2 archaeologists, plus me and my partner on the camera crew.
What's that?
Yep.
Number 20 will be more wood. Okay.
We are here because of a mystery. There's stuff scattered around in the mud.
All intact, or was that?
But the ground is still frozen and the gullies are covered with snow.
So what we're doing now is we're walking the site. This is an area where in 1999 some researchers were passing by this area and noticed some artifacts, particularly some things behind us here, this can behind us. They observed a number of pieces of fabric and metal and things at the site. They contacted me in Inughuit. Based on the information, we thought this site should come up and we should take a look at it.
There's a little piece there.
Maybe trace this edge out here to see how far.
The question is, why would anyone leave behind their equipment here, on this frozen beach? All of these objects have to be dug up without destroying anything. This is not the time to speculate. Time is short. The weather might close in at any time. The archaeologists work day and night. My idea with this trip was to make a short story for my show on Inuit broadcasting. But we kept finding more and more things. It became clear that this story was going to take a long time. We were digging into a real mystery. The end of June is when scientists arrive to begin their Arctic field season. Their base is at Resolute Bay. One of them is John England, a geologist who comes to the high Arctic every summer.
We were there surveying this lowland and traveling quite extensively by quad and mapping things and looking for driftwood and whalebone, things stranded above modern-day sea level that give the age of very ancient beaches, thousands of years old. So we're doing this reconnaissance. As we got near the shore, right near the sea ice, we noticed some small objects in the distance. And again, it could be a rock, or it could be a whalebone, it could be anything. So we went directly over to that. And there wasn't a lot there, but what was there immediately intrigued us.
One chance in a million. And what did they find?
A small box, I think, was the most dramatic thing that we saw, or the most intriguing. It was this little box. When we opened it up, we could see inside a mountain transit, a surveying instrument that he would have used to make astronomical observations to determine latitude and longitude. So it was something that whoever owned it would have regarded it as very valuable in terms of his scientific work.
The instrument that John England found was sent here to a museum in Ottawa. It's the workplace of Randall Brooks. Randall is a specialist in old instruments. He showed me a transit almost exactly like the one from Arqiok Island.
How does it work? Once you set it up and have the base flat with the level,
Yes.
'cause, I mean, what you would do there, because there was only one level, you'd rotate it around, you'd level it in one direction, rotate it 90
Yes.
degrees, level it in the second.
This must have been made 100 years before GPS was invented. Navigators and explorers tried to figure out where they were. You needed a clear sky and lots of time.
Then he would be able to, and I'll lift it up here, look through the telescope and sight on the object that he wants to measure, the first object, and then rotate it around and maybe vertically, depending on the terrain, if he's measuring things, mountains and landmarks, and measure it, and then take, at each point he would take the measurements on the horizontal and then the vertical. He would note each of the measurements down in a notebook and then calculate the angles between the landmarks.
The writing on the metal was in German. Randall has a list of 7,000 old instrument makers. He began asking German researchers for help. He found an article that convinced him the transit was made around 1921. Randall's discovery was big news. There was only one German expedition around at that time, and those men were believed to have died out on the sea ice. Maybe something else happened. One mystery was giving way to another. The German Arctic expedition has gone down in history for one reason. It vanished from the face of the earth. People have spent 75 years speculating about its fate. The leader was Hans Kruger, a geologist who wanted to be a famous explorer. His assistant was from Denmark. His name was Bjarne. In 1929, the two men sailed from Denmark to Greenland. I found one person still alive who was on the same ship. Frederica de Laguna is 98 and nearly blind, but she has a clear picture of Kruger in her mind.
So there was Kruger on board, and he had with him another German, and that poor fellow was seasick for the 3 weeks that it took us to get from Copenhagen across the Atlantic and up Davis Straits and into our first port in Greenland. And at that time I formed a very bad opinion of Kruger because he laughed at this man and treated this as a weakness.
When the ship arrived in Greenland, Kruger and his assistant began to prepare for their big trek. It was the last time Frederica laid eyes on them, but she saw them in her dreams.
And I had a very vivid dream. It was in a way prophetic. I had a few of those extraordinarily vivid dreams in my life. And I don't really believe that they meant anything. They're just that I expressed a very deep concern. And it was to the effect that Kruger was going to lose his life. And it was because the ship that was to bring him the supplies failed to arrive at the right place. I guess you're maybe the first person that I have ever spoken to about what it was that he was going to die because the supply ship did not reach them in time.
After a week of careful digging, Doug Stenton and Bob Parks have done what they can.
about 50 artifacts here, all basically on the surface of the ground. And we surveyed and mapped them all in and spent the last day or so collecting them. We have a fuel can, pieces of rope and canvas, what appears to be some clothing, some rock samples, some pieces of wood.
But no human remains, nor any sign of dead dogs or a sled. But who knows? There's still snow along the beach. Something more could be hidden around here.
Now,
The people who left these things would have come from the sea on their dog team. But hardly anyone ever passed this way. Kruger's expedition is on everyone's mind.
I guess we were really starting to think about Kruger because it was really puzzling. Why would someone leave a very valuable instrument? Why would they also leave just a scattering of handfuls of rock samples that were obviously of interest to this person? They were collected and what were they really leaving these behind? It would take no effort. You could fill your pockets with them, And certainly a little instrument on a sled with dogs wouldn't have been any extra thing to carry. So we really wondered why somebody would leave it. So immediately you start thinking, well, was this person in trouble? Were they suffering, or were they really suddenly just wanting to escape the area with as little material as they could possibly need to carry?
The Inuit of North Greenland live a very traditional life. Even today, many are full-time hunters. In the old days, when white explorers were trying for the North Pole, the North Greenland Inuit became their guides. They saved many white lives. So when Kruger arrived, he hired the best man he could find. His name was Arqiok.
I don't really know too much about Arqiok. For sure, he had been a good guide for many years. He was experienced in going out on the land with white men. He was well prepared. So he was hired by Kruger as the only Inuk on the expedition.
Arqiok's relatives live in Qanak. Those who remember him are getting old. But his reputation is still alive.
I have heard he was a great hunter, fearless of going hunting. And he had very good dogs. He was no doubt good at leading an expedition. He was social. People wanted to go with him. He didn't often get angry.
Kruger had big plans. He wanted to travel from Greenland right across Ellesmere Island in Canada and way out on the frozen ocean. He wanted to prove that there was no new continent or island to be conquered, like American explorers had claimed. It would be a risky trek.
By going far out onto the sea ice, they're going to a place where none of them had ever been before, including Arqiok. So the risks are you're traveling into the unknown. You have probably a depleted food supply. You have the problem of snow in the springtime as the atmosphere warms. So you have the problem of traveling through snow on top of the ice. You have the problem of currents that you're not familiar with. perhaps cracks in the ice, areas of cracks that are frozen over and look safe but aren't. So there's all sorts of unknowns. Combine this with the fact that you don't have enough Inuit and you don't have enough dogs. So those are the risks.
Arqiok knew the land on the Canadian side. He hunted muskox in Canada, and he had been part of the 5th Thule expedition.
My parents and Arqiok were in Canada for nearly 4 years. They almost forgot how to speak their own language. The people from Arctic Bay used to tell me it was not their town, but my father's town.
They were here in Canada in the Kiwadut region with the 5th Thule expedition. They even had a house. Arqiok was here for 3 years, and he's remembered by the Inuit. There are stories about his time in Arctic Bay too.
6 years later, Kruger arrived in Greenland and hired Arqiok. They spent the winter training for their expedition. Once they got caught in a blizzard and had to eat some of their dogs. Bjarre froze his toes and Kruger later got sick, probably from the raw dog meat. The 2 white men were still sick when the expedition left Greenland. Kruger was spitting up blood. Arqiok's wife didn't like it. She didn't want her husband to go.
My grandmother didn't want him to go because she was pregnant. They were disagreeing as a couple. They parted on bad terms. My grandmother told him to leave and never come back.
Perhaps Kruger's expedition was doomed from the start. Ken Harper is a historian who lived in Greenland before he moved to Nunavut. He had read that many people had trouble with Kruger.
Kruger was the sort of person you couldn't tell him nothing.
Kruger wanted to become famous. He was prepared to risk everything.
It seems that he had a secret agenda that he hadn't shared with everyone, and that I don't know if his secret agenda was known to his Danish assistant, but I'm pretty certain his secret agenda was not known to Arqiok. The secret plan was that he would continue right across the Arctic Ocean to the west of the North Pole. He would continue from the Axel Heiberg area right over ultimately to Russia. And apparently he had had some communication with Russian scientists letting him know that he planned to do this. In the last note that Kruger wrote from northern Greenland that he sent back to Germany before leaving for Ellesmere Island, he wrote, "I authorize you expressly to point out that any search expedition is totally pointless." Now, that's a very strange thing for somebody to say at the beginning of an expedition. Usually, you would want somebody to know where you were going to be, so that if you got in trouble, a search expedition would be successful. But he expected any search expedition to be totally pointless. And this can only mean that that his ultimate goal was to go somewhere that he hadn't told the authorities that he was going. Now, this is extremely foolish and irresponsible.
The 3 men of the German Arctic expedition are heading west, across Ellesmere Island. At first, they had a second team to help them cache supplies. But the main sled was so heavily loaded that the men had to walk. I wonder what Arqiok thought.
Arqiok nalunang ito. Ako kitome ila tan ako kitome vino.
Back in Greenland, Arqiok had years and years of experience in dealing with white men who had never been in the Arctic before.
Akaw saluni. Yakanayak tigi yaulun, khimusyak tigi yauluni, tamakkuningan, ukuyoktotumu uktunadjiging ituni.
But maybe his patience changed with time. And if Kruger was so hard to deal with, if he didn't want to turn back, Arqiok was unhappy. I wonder, anything is possible.
He was used to being with white people. He probably thought that Kruger was eccentric and different. But by the time the expedition was ready to leave Bosch Peninsula, when he realized that Kruger was indeed sick, in my view, it was too late for Arqiok to change his mind.
Kruger was vomiting blood. The other man had a frozen foot, and they're traveling off the map. It was crazy.
Arqiok, he certainly had some misgivings about this expedition. Even before the support party left them after crossing Ellesmere Island, he sent back a message with the 2 Inuit that had been part of the first support party and then turned back. He sent back a message to the Danish administrator at Joelie that he was convinced that neither white man would return from the expedition if it were alone. The Dane, Bjarre, had frozen his toes already, and Kruger was spitting up blood. And this was as the expedition was just starting. But Arqiok also told the 2 Inuit of the support party that he wouldn't leave them in the lurch.
In Ottawa, the objects we dug up on Heiberg Island are being examined in this laboratory. Tara Grant is a conservator working for the government. Her job is to preserve historical artifacts.
So is there much work to preserve them?
Because it's frozen for most of the year,
yes,
it's in much better condition than something you'd find buried down here.
Yes.
And again, it was all surface finds, so again, much less dirty than if you'd dug it up from a soily environment.
Yes, yeah.
So, you know, this was really minimal treatment, a lot of this stuff. The problem that I'm having as far as time goes is with the paper objects. They're much more time consuming.
Yes, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Now, with everything cleaned up, are we closer to solving the mystery?
Can you tell us anything that we didn't get to see when they were digging these or when they were removing them? Did you find anything at all?
Yes, but the tin can, well, you picked it up and you knew there was something in it because it was heavy, right?
Yes.
But you didn't know whether it was just full of sand.
That's right.
So I took the lid off and it was full of wrapped rock samples. So geological samples that Kruger had collected.
Yes.
Well, the rocks were wrapped, and they're wrapped in a piece of brown paper, and inside were little paper notes saying where these rocks were collected.
Okay.
This is from rock number 14.
Yes.
There's a catalog number usually in the upper left corner.
Yes.
And then the date here is 25th of April, and it's written in Roman numerals.
Yes.
And then 1930. Yeah. And it says Heiberg Island, Nordspitz.
Nordspitz.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So Heiberg Island, the north point.
Yeah.
And certainly of all the notes I've opened so far, none have a date that is later than the last cairn date, then we know that Kruger was still alive.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, okay.
But it is Kruger's handwriting.
Yes.
That means the expedition made a long trek on the ice. They must have been out there for weeks.
I imagine it's like trying to investigate crime scene, or if you do this preserving. Is that sort of like detective work when you do?
It can be. I mean, this one's been really interesting because they are partial place names and things. So you're going around looking at maps, trying to match up names.
Yes.
I'd love to know what happened to them, but I mean, obviously, at least one person made it past Cape Southwest. And then it would be nice eventually if somebody finds the sled.
Yes.
And the rest of the gear.
Yes, yeah. That was what I was hoping to find, but there was no sleds, no solid.
No bodies, no
nothing.
dogs.
No.
It's been 77 years since the Kruger expedition vanished. All three men long given up for dead. Or that's what I thought, anyway. But then a friend of mine was filming in Arqioq, North Greenland, where he met a man called Mystery.
Inughuit takuduka tamu miaka payu huit tikatahu amigo tikatamu mahum tikema kihima tamane tua mangituku inuadet wonut utukano hodunit abkhumsha pinyaro titakuyukukira.
That sounded impossible. Those ships were American. They were building a military base in North Greenland. But that was 20 years after the Kruger expedition had vanished. How could Arqiok be there? But like Mystery said, many people know the story. Some are members of Arqiok's family.
Around 1950, there were many things going on. Planes arrived, ships, dog sleds. A man came out, dressed in American clothing. When people approached him, they saw it was Arqiok. But he went back inside as soon as he was recognized.
Yes, so I have heard. Arqiok ran into Khalasuk. Khalasuk said to him, "Hello, cousin." But Arqiok disappeared right away. A few people saw him after that, but he always disappeared among the white people.
First, a vanished expedition. Then the strange return of Arqiok. Now we have a double mystery, unless we're dealing with a ghost. This we know. It was spring when the Kruger expedition crossed Ellesmere Island. The snow was soft. Their sled was extremely heavy. It was slow going. When they reached the sea, the support team turned back. Nobody really knows what happened after that. There was no game to hunt. The dogs were getting weak. Kruger was sick and exhausted, but he insisted they keep going. What could Arqiok be thinking?
The ratio of Inuit to non-Inuit on any of Peary's expeditions was was high, because these people knew what they were doing and knew what role they wanted the Inuit to play, and knew roughly how many Inuit assistants they would need. I speculate, and it's only speculation, that this expedition could have reached a point where Arqiok said, "We've got to go back. It's crazy to go any farther." If Kruger, in his single-minded determination to achieve his goals, said, "No, we must continue, and Arqiok said, "We've got to go back. We'll die if we go farther." If Arqiok started making preparations to go, who knows what would have been going on in the mind of Kruger.
The Arctic in 1930 was truly remote. It took a year before anyone realized the expedition was missing. 1 year after that, an RCMP team set out on a marathon search from their post on Ellesmere Island. When they reached the sea, they split into two groups. One group was led by Constable Paddy Hamilton. They fought blizzards. Soon, they were in trouble.
Day 15. We found a cairn, but there was no message from Kruger. 4 of our dogs died from starvation 2 days ago. They were eaten by their mates. We had begun to walk beside the sleds, yet 5 more dogs died yesterday and today. We've lost 17 in all. But we don't talk about it. All of us nibble on the dog flesh we carry on our sleds, simply to avoid.
The other group, led by Corporal Harry Stallworthy, was not doing any better.
It is our worst crisis so far. I have to stop and sit down at short intervals. We are still far away from our food cache.
The RCMP team spent nearly 2 months searching. They were lucky to survive. They came back convinced that the Kruger party had perished. The irony is that the emergency food cache that saved their lives was right at Cape Southwest, only a kilometer or 2 from where we dug up the stuff on the beach. The fate of the Kruger party became a favorite topic of speculation among northern travelers. There was no end to the theories.
We had big dog teams. We moved quickly when we had good going.
Ray Thorsteinsson spends his retirement studying fossils. Ray worked 40 years for the Geological Survey of Canada. He made many trips by dog team around Axel Heiberg Island, always looking for clues. In the spring of 1957, he reached a small island far out into the frozen ocean.
We came down the west coast here of Axel Heiberg Island to, I think it was Lee Fjord. Then we crossed 40 miles of sea ice and landed here on the northeast coast of Meehan Island. And then we proceeded around the island with my one dog team to Anderson Point here, which is on the southeastern corner of the island. And I could see the cairn where we stopped our dogs and made camp. And after we had supper and fed our dogs, I walked up to the cairn with my companion and found this tin can in the cairn, and in it was Kruger's note, which I opened up and read. It was in German, but I could read German quite easily.
The note said they were headed for an island to the south. Ray searched and searched in vain. Now he's convinced that Kruger had to change his plan.
He was there a month earlier than I was, approximately. I got there in early June. He was there in early May. Well, I was having a hard time finding seals, so I don't doubt that he probably was short of dog food when he got down there, the same as I was. And He probably did what I did, was forced to do. Head back to Axel Heiberg Island and hope you'd find something there.
They did go to Heiberg Island. But on that beach, we found the personal kit of one person, plus Kruger's scientific instruments, plus his rock samples. What had happened? After Tara Grant's detective work, Doug Stenton is sure of one thing.
Based on what we recovered from the site, we don't actually think it was a campsite because of the nature of the materials that we found. We think it was probably a cache where these materials had been stored there or left there intentionally to be picked up at another time. We also think it's possible that not all of the members of the expedition may have still been alive at that time.
If you were in fact down to one person and you knew the other two had died, say the Europeans had died and Inuk was alive, if there was only one individual, I think the insecurity that you were going to experience the same fate as your friends, I think that would be really quite horrific.
Who was alive and who was dead?
We assume that one person has died. It's possible that two people have died. So there's either one or two survivors. So who are the survivors? It's probably not Kruger, because he was probably sicker than the other fellow. Probably the survivor or the surviving party that was responsible for placing the cache at Southwest Point on Axel Heiberg Island probably included Arqiok. Could have been only Arqiok, could have been Arqiok and one of the others. What are the chances of survival? It's hard to say. There are some miraculous tales of survival in the Arctic against all odds. It's possible to survive, but it's very difficult, and what we don't know is if they had any dogs left. I would surmise at this point they didn't have any dogs left. The chances of survival, I think, are slim.
But if Arqiok was still alive, could he have made it to safety?
I believe the story, you know. I will tell you right now, because I met a Kanak person. We have close ties and very close relationship with people from Kanak and Siowapaluk today. When Arqiok went in the direction, not home, but in the direction of Arctic Bay, where he knows the country. If he went down there and found a way to get on a ship, or a whaling ship, or whatever ship, I'm sure he would have been homesick. He had a daughter, after all, that he left behind when his wife told him not to come back, not to bother anymore. I'm sure he had a reason to go home. I'm sure, like being any Inuk, he wanted to go home and see his land for the last time. And he wanted to see his daughter, maybe. So he had something to go back to. But maybe he was scared and didn't want to be seen anymore openly.
The stories say Arqiok joined the American military. I went on the internet. The Americans were willing to help. They went back in their records, but there was no trace of anyone called Arqiok. Maybe he was hiding elsewhere, like right here in Nunavut.
I've heard that he was alive afterward, and that he has a wife and children in Canada. Some people have seen his daughter in Pond Inlet. When she started saying that she has siblings here in Greenland, they removed her. Maybe because it was kind of a secret.
The mystery of Arqioq has definitely crossed the water.
1975, we were in Arctic Bay, Canada. Hans was asking about Arqiok. There were cops that heard the question being asked, and they told them not to say anything about it. It's mysterious.
Inuits in Canada too have stories, from Pond Inlet and Arctic Bay to Grise Fjord and Resolute.
They were killing dogs to feed others. The white man had no spark of love in him. He was always riding on the sled. He told Arqiok, "Kill your partner." Arqiok said okay. He loaded his gun facing his partner, but instead he shot the white man on the sled.
Nobody can know what actually happened, because if he survived, Arqiok was always hiding. The possibilities feed the imagination.
Not far from my community, many years ago, I found an old rifle. It was a 22 with a lever action mechanism. It was very old and rusty. It was down by the beach. I took it home and kept it for a while. But unfortunately, I threw it out before I heard these stories about Arqiok. I've always regretted it. I wonder if it belonged to them.
If Arqiok was the last man standing, there might be one other reason, though, why he might be hesitant to go back to Greenland. He might have feared that he would be blamed for the deaths of the white men. And he knew that northern Greenland was changing. He knew that a white man's sense of law was slowly coming to the Arctic. The white authorities might not have understood why he was the last man alive, and might have ascribed some blame to him in some sense, perhaps some punishment.
The Arctic is full of stories and legends. How much is true? Who cares?
Stories need endings. And the story of Arqiok has no ending. We don't know with any sense of certainty what happened to Arqiok. People in general don't like stories without endings. Sometimes there are no endings. And if we can't accept that, we make them up.
I love to hear good stories, and I love to pass them on. The search for Arqiok and Kruger has been an adventure. Kruger's ending is tragic. His fiancée was so upset, she committed suicide. But in Arqiok's case, whatever happened to him, his family back in Greenland now want to begin a search of their own.
Of course, I'd be interested in knowing more of what happened. If he had children in Canada, our relatives, it would be wonderful to meet them sometime.
Napit no. Non nin sero papat.